This is our home now, and you need to learn your place in it. My daughter-in-law said that to me, in my own kitchen, standing at my own stove, while I was making breakfast in the house I'd owned for 22 years. She didn't whisper it. She said it like a fact. Like gravity. I set down my spatula, turned to look at her, and said nothing. But I started counting. Because I'd been an insurance adjuster for 34 years, I know how to wait for the right moment to file a claim. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. The coffee was still brewing when it happened, 6:30 in the morning. First week of October, and Shelby was already standing in my kitchen in her bathrobe, like she owned the deed. My son Caleb had moved them in 3 months earlier. Him, Shelby, and their 5-year-old daughter Gracie, after his landscaping business collapsed under him like wet cardboard. I'd said yes without hesitation. Of course I had. He was my son. I want to be honest about something, because I think a lot of people in my position make the same mistake and then wonder how they ended up where I did. When Caleb called me that August, his voice cracked on the phone in a way I hadn't heard since he was 9 years old and broke his arm falling out of the oak tree in the backyard. Dad, we're in trouble. The business is gone. We've got maybe 60 days before we lose the apartment. I told him to pack what they needed and come home. I didn't ask for a timeline. I didn't draw up any paperwork. I was his father. You don't negotiate with your child when they're drowning, what I should have understood, and what 34 years in the insurance industry should have taught me, is that the terms of any arrangement matter most before anyone needs them. Once the crisis has passed, no one wants to read the fine print. My name is Edmund. I'm 63 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Raleigh, North Carolina, on a quiet street with big maples that turn orange in October. I bought it in 2001. My wife Marlene and I raised Caleb in that house, and when she passed from ovarian cancer in 2018, I stayed because leaving felt like losing her twice. I'd retired from Coastal Mutual Insurance 2 years before Caleb called. Comfortable retirement. Not wealthy, or so they assumed. The first month was fine. Better than fine, actually. Caleb was grateful in the way only someone who's truly scared can be. He helped around the yard without being asked. Shelby cooked dinner twice a week and thanked me for the guest room. Gracie called me Pop and wanted to sit next to me at breakfast. I thought, foolishly, I understand now, that this might actually be good. That the house might feel less empty. Month 2 is when the furniture started moving. I came downstairs one Saturday to find my armchair, the green one Marlene picked out. The one I'd read in every single night for 15 years, pushed into the corner and replaced at the center of the living room by a sectional sofa Shelby had apparently ordered online. On my credit card, an authorized user card I'd added for Caleb's gas and groceries. The sectional cost $840. When I brought it up, Caleb shifted his weight and looked at the floor. Shelby didn't. She looked right at me and said, "That chair was too small for all of us to sit comfortably. We're a family now. We need room." I returned the sectional. I removed Caleb from the authorized user account. I moved my armchair back to the center. What I didn't do was establish the rules I should have established in week 1. That was my mistake, and I own it. By month 3, the kitchen incident happened. The you need to learn your place moment. After she said it, Shelby poured herself a cup of my coffee and walked back upstairs. Caleb had heard the whole thing from the hallway. I know because I saw his shadow under the door, and I saw it disappear when she said it, like he'd taken 1 step back instead of 1 step forward. I ate my breakfast alone. I washed my plate. I went to my home office, sat down at my desk and opened a new spreadsheet. I labeled it the same way I'd labeled claim files for 3 decades. Incident log, date description, dollar amount where applicable. I am not a dramatic man. I have never once in my life done anything rash. But I am a methodical one, and I had just decided that this situation was going to be handled the same way I'd handled complicated claims for 34 years. Carefully, completely, and with documentation that left no room for argument. Over the next 5 months, I wrote down everything. October 14th, Shelby tells Caleb my old-fashioned food in the pantry is taking up space they need. She donates 2 boxes of my canned goods to Goodwill without asking. Replacement cost, $67. November 3rd, Caleb informs me that his friend Derek will be sleeping on the couch for a few days. Derek stays 11 days. He eats my groceries and uses my shower. He never once acknowledges my presence. November 19th, I am asked by Shelby, not by Caleb, to keep my bedroom TV volume below a level where they can hear it from the room next door. We share a wall. December. The utility bills spike. Electricity up from $140 to $310. Water from $60 to $155. Water from $60 to $155. I say nothing about it. I write it down. December 22nd, the night everything broke. I had Christmas plans, not elaborate ones. I'm 63, and I live alone when things are normal. My neighbor Gus was coming over, an old friend who'd been 2 doors down for 17 years and who'd sat with me the night Marlene died until the sun came up. I'd told Caleb and Shelby about it weeks earlier. A simple thing. My home, my guest. A few hours of holiday dinner on December 22nd because Gus had family plans on the 25th. I spent the afternoon cooking. Honey-glazed ham, green beans, dinner rolls from the bakery on Hillsborough Street. I set the table, my table, the round oak one Marlene and I carried up from a flea market in Durham 20 years ago, and put out the good dishes. Gus arrived at 6. We shook hands at the door, and I took his coat. Shelby came downstairs at 6:15. She looked at Gus, looked at the table, and then looked at me. Did you forget we made plans tonight? I hadn't forgotten because there were no plans. I told her that, calmly, at the door. She said, we told you we were having people over this week. I said, you mentioned possibly having people over next week. She said, and I want to be precise here because this is the sentence I've replayed more times than I can count. You can eat in the kitchen, or you can eat in your room. We're using the dining room tonight. Gus was standing 2 feet away, holding his hat. My house, my table, my guest, my kitchen, my dishes. I looked at Shelby for a long moment. Then I looked at Caleb, who had appeared at the top of the stairs. He didn't come down. He didn't say a word. He just stood there looking at his shoes. Gus said quietly, Ed, I can head home. I said, no, stay right here. I went to the kitchen and I got my phone off the counter. I walked back to the foyer where Gus was still standing with his hat, and I dialed my attorney. His name is Paul Estabrook. I've known him for 18 years. He answered on the second ring, because I'd called ahead and told him I might need him tonight. I said, Paul, I'm ready to proceed with what we discussed. He said, I'll send the notice by certified mail first thing, tomorrow. You'll have the 10-day clock running by the 23rd. When I hung up, Shelby was standing in the hallway looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before. Not contempt. Something closer to confusion, like she was seeing a different person than the one she'd moved in with. I said, you and Caleb are guests in my home. That arrangement is ending. You'll receive formal notice of a 10-day vacate request tomorrow. I'd encourage you to take it seriously. Then I walked back into the dining room, sat down across from Gus, and we had dinner. The ham was good. North Carolina law is clear on this. When someone stays in your home without a formal lease and without paying rent, the process for removing them is a written notice, 10 days in NC if there was never a formal tenancy. Paul had walked me through the statute 6 weeks earlier when I'd first gone to see him. I hadn't told Caleb or Shelby I'd done that. I'd driven downtown to Estabrook and Collins on a Tuesday afternoon, told Paul the situation, and asked him what my options were if things escalated. Paul had looked at me over his reading glasses and said, Edmund, you've already been more patient than most courts would ask you to be. If you need to move forward, the law is entirely on your side. I'd gone home that afternoon and finished my incident log, documented expenses from the 3 months they'd been there. Utilities, groceries I tracked when they'd used significantly more than my baseline. The sectional return fee, the pantry goods. Total, approximately $4,200 in uncompensated household costs, not including the $15,000 I'd given Caleb in 2 installments to cover his outstanding business debts, money he'd asked for with a handshake promise to repay, which I had in writing in a text message he'd sent me in September. I want to be clear that none of this was about money. I could have kept feeding them indefinitely without financial hardship. What I couldn't keep doing, what I will not let anyone do, is make me invisible in my own home. Marlene would have been disgusted. She was the gentler one, but she had a backbone made of iron when it mattered. The certified mail arrived on December 23rd. I know, because I was watching from my office window when the mail carrier came. Shelby signed for it. She stood on the front porch for a long moment reading it, then went inside. 20 minutes later, Caleb knocked on my office door. He didn't yell. That surprised me. He sat down in the chair across from my desk, the chair where clients used to sit when they came to my home office years ago. And he put his hands on his knees and he said, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing what I should have done in October. I'm asking you to respect the boundaries I should have established when you moved in. The notice is legal and valid. You have 10 days. He said, "We don't have anywhere to go." I said, "You've had 5 months to prepare for the possibility that this arrangement might not be permanent. I don't know what you did with that time." He said, "She didn't mean it that way. You know how she gets." I said, "I know exactly how she gets. I've been documenting exactly how she gets for 5 months. He looked up at me then. Caleb has his mother's eyes, gray-green with a ring of brown near the center. I've never been able to be truly hard with him when he looks at me directly, and I don't think I was entirely hard with him then. But I was firm. I said, "I love you. I will always love you. This is not about loving you. This is about the fact that I am 63 years old and I still have a right to eat dinner in my own dining room with my neighbor without being sent to my room." Your wife said that to me, Caleb. In my home. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I know, that was the only moment in the whole thing where I had to look away from him." They left on January 1st. Not because the 10 days forced them out. They packed before the deadline. I think Shelby understood, once the notice arrived, that the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't going to be managed anymore. Caleb's sister in Greensboro agreed to take them in temporarily, which I hadn't known was an option. It turned out to be an option all along. The house was quiet again on the morning of January 2nd. I walked through every room the way you walk through a space you thought you'd lost. Guest room, their things gone, a coffee stain on the carpet near the closet I'd need to have cleaned. Living room, my green chair back where it belonged. Kitchen, my cabinet arrangement restored. The coffee maker on the left side of the counter where I'd always kept it. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and I just breathed for a while. Then I called Paul Estabrook. "I want to file for recovery of the $15,000, I said, and I want to document the household expense differential. All of it." Paul said, "I figured you'd call. I had my paralegal prepare the civil claim last week. That's what 34 years of working with good professionals does for you. Everybody's already one step ahead. The civil filing went to Wake County Superior Court in late January. Caleb retained an attorney through the local legal aid clinic, a young woman named Miss Winters, fresh out of NC State's law program, clearly doing her best with a weak hand. The claim was straightforward. $15,000 in documented loans, confirmed in writing by text message. $4,200 in uncompensated household expenses. Total claim, $19,200. Shelby apparently advised Caleb to countersue, claiming I'd promised them the arrangement was indefinite and that my eviction notice constituted breach of an oral agreement. Ms. Winters was too good a lawyer to file that with any real enthusiasm. The filing was thin. The hearing was in March before Judge Aldridge, who I'm told runs a tight courtroom. He does. We were in and out in under 20 minutes. Paul presented the text message exchange. Caleb's own words, "I'll pay you back both installments. I promise, Dad, I mean it." Alongside the utility records and my incident log. Miss Winters presented the argument about an indefinite oral agreement. Judge Aldrich asked her one question. Do you have any documentation of that agreement? She said she had her client's testimony. He said, that's insufficient. Next, judgment for plaintiff. $19,200 plus court costs. Payment plan to be established within 60 days. Caleb didn't look at me when they read the ruling. Shelby wasn't there. I'd noticed she wasn't there. In the corridor, Ms. Winters touched Caleb's arm and said something quietly. He nodded. He looked tired, thinner than I'd seen him in years. He walked over to me. Paul stepped slightly to the side, giving us space. Caleb said, I'm sorry, Dad. I should have said something. When she talked to you that way. I should have said something every time. I said, yes. You should have said something every time. I said, yes. You should have. He said, I didn't know how. I said, I know. That's something you're going to have to figure out. For Gracie's sake, if not your own. He nodded. We didn't shake hands, we didn't hug. But he looked at me before he turned to go. And it was a real look, not the eyes on the floor look I'd been getting for months. That was enough. For then, my neighbor Gus came over the following Thursday. We sat on the back porch with the good bourbon, the Woodford Reserve I save for occasions, and he told me I'd handled the whole thing with more restraint than he would have. I said, I had the same amount of anger. I just had somewhere to put it. He said, the paperwork. I said, the paperwork. He laughed. We watched the backyard for a while. The maples were budding. First green of spring pushing through. He said, you think Caleb will pay it back? I thought about that. I said, I think Caleb will spend the next few years becoming the man I raised him to be. Whether the money comes with that or separately, I'll know soon enough. We drank for a while without talking, which is the mark of a real friendship, and then Gus said, you ever think about whether you were too hard on them? I said, every day. I also think about December 22nd every day. I also think about December 22nd every day. I think about Marlene every day. She worked herself half to death, making that house into a home, and she didn't do it so someone could tell me to eat in my room. Gus said, no, she did not. There's a thing that happens, I think, when you're older, and you've been widowed and you live alone. People start to assume you've become optional, that your needs are smaller, that your home is more a holding pattern than a life. Caleb didn't invent that assumption. It was Shelby who sharpened it into something cruel, but the assumption was already in the air. I am not optional. My home is not a stopover. I am 63 years old. I have buried my wife. I have built a career from scratch and sold it at a profit no one in my family knew existed. And I have earned every square foot of the house on that quiet street in Raleigh. I want to tell you something I haven't told anyone except Paul and Gus. When I sold my stake in the Raleigh area independent insurance agency I'd built with 2 partners over 12 years, a sale that closed in 2019, the year after Marlene died, the net was $1.9 million. After taxes, after the buyout structure, I walked away with enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life without touching the retirement accounts. Caleb didn't know. Shelby definitely didn't know. I'd kept it quiet the same way I keep most things quiet. Not from dishonesty, but because I'd watched money change family dynamics for 3 decades in the claims business, and I wanted to see who the people around me actually were. I found out. In April, Caleb called and asked if he could bring Gracie by on a Saturday, without Shelby. I said yes. They came at 11 in the morning, and Gracie ran straight to the kitchen and asked if we could make pancakes, and I said we absolutely could. We spent 2 hours making pancakes, and she told me about her kindergarten class and the girl who sits next to her, named Becca, who has a pet turtle. Caleb sat at the kitchen table and watched us and didn't say much. At one point, when Gracie had wandered into the living room to watch cartoons, he said, "She's missed you." I said, "I've missed her too." He said, "Are we okay? You and me?" I put down the spatula. I thought about it on the spatula. I thought about it honestly, the way he deserved. I said, "We're getting there. Ask me again in 6 months." He nodded like that was fair. I think it was fair. The payments on the judgment started coming in June. Not from Caleb, from his sister, who called me in May and said she'd loaned him the money to begin the repayment schedule and that she expected him to pay her back, not me to forgive the debt. Her name is Faye, and she has always been the sharper of the two. I told her she'd done a good thing. She said she'd done a necessary thing, which is probably closer to accurate. By summer, the house felt like mine again, in a way it hadn't since Marlene died, not because they were gone. It had been quiet before they came. Something else. Something about having defended it. About having said, "This matters, this is mine, I am still here." Gus beat me at chess twice in July. He always beats me in July for some reason I've never been able to figure out. We sat on the back porch after the second game, and he asked me what I learned from the whole thing. I said that the documents I should have had ready on day one would have saved everyone 5 months of misery. He said, "That's the insurance adjuster answer." I said, "What's the human answer?" He thought about it. He said that you can love somebody completely and still refuse to disappear for them. I looked out at the maples. Late July light, long and golden, the kind that makes everything look a little more significant than it probably is. I said, "That's the one." We sat there until it got dark, which is what you do when you have a friend who's been 2 doors down for 17 years, and you're both old enough to know that evenings like that don't last forever. My house was mine. My chair was in the right place. The coffee maker was on the left side of the counter where it belongs. I was still here. I still think about that green armchair, the one Marlene picked out, the one Shelby pushed into the corner like it was furniture from a yard sale, like it didn't have 20 years of my life sitting in it. That chair is back where it belongs now, and some mornings I sit in it just because I can, just to remind myself that the small things are never really small. What happened in my house wasn't complicated, even though it felt that way while I was living through it. Caleb and Shelby came in through a door I held open, and they kept walking until they'd walked into every room. That's not a mystery. That's what happens when nobody draws the line. I didn't draw it early enough, and I paid for that with 5 months I can't get back. That's on me. I own that completely. But here's what I've come to understand about the way these things unfold. When a person treats someone else's generosity as something they're owed, the bill always comes due eventually, not because the universe keeps score in any mystical sense. I don't believe in that, but because reality is patient in a way that cruelty is not. Shelby was certain she'd read me correctly. An older man, alone, too soft to push back. She was right about 2 of those things, and wrong about the one that mattered. I was alone. I was Ola. But I had spent 34 years learning exactly how to document the truth, and wait for the right moment to present it. That's the thing nobody tells you about integrity. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's just the habit of being honest about what's actually happening, writing it down, and not flinching when it's time to act on it. Every entry in that incident log was an act of discipline. Every month I held my tongue and kept my records, was a choice to be smarter than I was angry. That kind of discipline is hard when someone is looking you in the eye and telling you to eat in your room. It is genuinely hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. And Caleb, I think about him too. He knew it was wrong. He stood at the top of those stairs, and he knew, and he went back to his room anyway. That cost him something real. Not just in legal fees and a judgment, but in the kind of self-respect a man needs to look his daughter in the eye. He's working on that now. I can see it when he brings Gracie over on Saturdays. He says please and thank you in my kitchen. He asked me last month if there was anything around the house I needed help with. Small things. But the small things are never really small. What I want, if anyone watching this is somewhere in the middle of what I went through, is for you to understand that you do not have to choose between loving your family and holding your ground. Caleb is my son. I've loved him since the moment he existed. Loving him did not require me to disappear. It did not require me to eat alone. It did not require me to let someone dismantle the home his mother built, one piece of furniture at a time, while he watched from the hallway. You can love someone all the way down to the bone and still say, "Not in my house. Not like this. Not anymore." That's not hardness. That's how you stay a person worth loving back.